most big African schools have some form of partnership with some schools in America, maybe based on research or grants or that kind of work. So we have one with Northwestern, which I found out about around that time earlier that year, and I put in an application and was selected to rotate in orthopedics.
By these things, can you even say add like slide presentations?
Apologies for that. Doctor, you could continue.
Okay. So after I rotated in Northwestern, it was both a wonderful experience and very, let's say, tough experience because at the time I had to go to Chicago and it was very cold at the time, which I wasn't quite used to. Um, but the difference is everywhere is cold. Inside's cold, inside the OR is cold, so there's basically nowhere to run for warmth. Um, but I got used to it over time. I met some wonderful people. Um, I also had to um, interact with surgeons and all the likes, and just tried my best to impress, scrubbing for surgeries, try and help and assist on some surgeries. And at the end of the day, I was able to get a very good evaluation from them and a letter of recommendation. I say that to say that US clinical rotations are important if this is a path you want to explore, especially depending on how competitive the specialty you might be interested in is. So I believe that rotation was very helpful for me in matching. And it's easier, objectively speaking, to get to rotation as a student than it is to get as a graduate. So um, if you are doing your final or penultimate year, now might be a good time to apply for one or two electives, even if it is an observership, shadowing someone, um, a tele-rotation, whatever the case may be. So I did that, and that was that rotation was what made me decide to fully commit to the US pathway. Seeing, I fell in love with the robotic surgeries and the advances in technology, the standard of care that we're seeing. I mean, the knowledge here in Nigeria and the minds we have in form of lecturers are very stimulating and so, but it's a whole different level when you see it in practice, all those things you read in your textbooks and all of that. So that was very motivating for me, and so I committed to it. Gained a few mentors, the likes of Dr. Mohammed Mutawakil. He's an orthopedic surgeon now at Northwestern. He's from Kano State here in Nigeria. So after the rotation, I came back to Nigeria, and then in 2023, I decided to take step two because I was thinking, you know what, how bad could it be? Worst case scenario, I would just have been preparing for 2 years. At the time, I was in 500 level, which is my fourth year of medical school. And when I was, and the difference though between that and the previous year is that in this year you have a professional exam at the end of the year. So this is a much tougher level with higher stakes. But because I had practiced with that and prioritize things well, I was involved in much more. I was involved with surgery. At the time, we started the trauma skills lab to train students because after my experience with Northwestern, I came back and I was like, if the students here can scrub in and assist with surgeries and suture and do all these things, we should be able to do it here. So a few friends and I came together and we tried to start something which the school later took up. So I was involved with that. I planned conferences with CND. But despite doing all that, I was able to balance with step two. My step two prep was pretty much very straightforward. You really do not need to study any material, maybe besides first aid, but the main thing at that time you will realize is just practicing questions because clinical medicine is so vast. And that's why we have like so many subspecialties because it's almost impossible to finish studying the human body. especially with one person. So the idea is to practice enough questions to know what is important and be able to master that. If you're looking for material to use, there's Boards and Beyond for step 2. I didn't use that, but I used online method, which gives summaries of everything. I also used Anki cards, Anki decks, and I did that more voraciously. That was way more important for me. And I did UO around almost 2 times. I did first pass, and I did like half a pass after that. And then I was taking MBMEs in between. My MBME scores around the time average around 240 to 254. I think the highest I had was probably that 254 at the time. The lowest I had was like a 240 or 238. So I felt pretty confident, and I wrote the exam 2 months before my professional exam for that year. When I took the exam, I had a 244, which kind of broke my heart because I believed I was better placed for a higher score, but that's still a great score. I mean, it's just funny now that might not be such a glamorous score, but it's still a good score to get you into any specialty. But at the time, I began to think more deeply about what I wanted to do and if I wanted to give myself, because originally I was quite interested in surgery, I wanted to give myself to all the research years and all the time that it would take to march into surgery. And I wasn't quite sure. So I began to look at other things that I might be interested in. And one specialty that came up, which eventually became home for me, was emergency medicine. I fell in love with just how fast-paced it is. It's very fast-paced. It's very hands-on. It's very my style, very laid back. Nothing. Surgery people are very serious and very, very firm. I like to let loose and take things relaxed, and EM people are very like that for me. So I just found home with EM, and it also gives me a chance to explore global health very much, being in the front lines for countries and places that may not have developed emergency medicine systems. So because of that, I got involved in research. I did some research in first aid in my penultimate year, and that also improved my interest. And subsequently, I started looking for rotations in emergency medicine, because prior to that, all my portfolio was surgery. So in my final year of medical school, I started looking and looking and looking. I was fortunate to meet a mentor in Dr. Untika Daniel, and she gave me some guidance. And then I was able to get an observership at Lehigh Valley in Pennsylvania. And that was beautiful for me because it gave me hands-on experience. Prior to that, just to be sure that this was what I wanted to do, I had done a rotation at a community center here in Lagos called Our Jolad, and it was just exhilarating. You got to do different kind of cases. It was almost like playing a game of what's going to come in next. And after that, I committed to the path. So subsequently, I did a rotation in Pennsylvania. That rotation was wonderful. I got to meet wonderful people like Dr. Greenberg, who basically invested in me. And then finally, I went for a conference in Las Vegas. That's ACEP, American College of Emergency Physicians, which I joined earlier that year alongside SAEM, Society for Academic Emergency Physicians. And the connections I made at that conference would prove useful during interview season. I was able to network with program directors, residents, attendings from all over the country in one place, and that was just beautiful for me. At the end of everything, I was able to get 8 interviews for emergency medicine. I only applied to emergency medicine because by the time I was applying, I was sold. There was no surgery. It was just EM for me, and so I only applied to emergency medicine. I applied to 66 programs, and I got 8 interviews. And of those 8, I was fortunate enough to match into my number one. So essentially, if there's anything I'll say um, has been important for me along the way, I'm just trying to tackle questions that might come before I just wrap it up. I'll say God was very important for me. I'm a person of faith, and that assurance that I believe God was behind me in everything I did helped me to take risks and also helped me to just like have the courage to move on and push on. I think persistence too was something at I say the rotations I did as if I just applied and I got in, but I've gotten several rejections. I've gotten several, unfortunately, we don't take this kind of students, or this kind of thing. So I've gotten my fair share of rejections in terms of rotations. In fact, I had to take TOEFL twice because of some very strict, and all these were setbacks that I could have faced. In fact, financial issues were also financial limitations, but persistence. If you just believe that this is the only outcome that makes sense for me, you'll keep pushing and you will get there eventually. And then the last thing for me, which was a very important factor, was environment. Right here in Nigeria, especially in my class, then we had a lot of people who were focused on this pathway. So a lot of us will be in the same rooms discussing, and the conversations will always rotate around this kind of discussion about these things. Will bring up and inspire you to do crazy things. For instance, we started a trauma skills lab, and we just started ourselves, our students. We wrote the curriculum up, we started it, and after about 2 editions, the school took it up and was like, this would be a good thing to have in the curriculum. So just having things like that, changes the game. Putting yourself in that space, like I said, going for conferences, connecting, networking with people, it changes your mind on the possibility of things that can be done. For a question, how did I know I could do it as a student? I didn't. But last year there was somebody from University of Calabar here in southeastern Nigeria who applied and matched as a student, and that was, prior to us hearing news about him, we were considering it. I was considering it especially, but when somebody has never done something before, you probably get a bit scared to just try it, and you don't know what challenges you might face. But having heard it and what he was able to do, I firmly believe that this is something I could get done. So I went for it, and successfully enough, I was able to get it done. At some point, I had to sacrifice some rotation attendances. I had to sacrifice some level of excellence in school because you miss a few classes here and there, and when you come back, you're just trying to catch up. But all in all, at the end of the day, it was worth it for my own goals. That's much about it. I think